She couldn't breathe, and the first person she reached for turned away to check if the photographer had gotten a good angle of the flowers. Welcome back to the Family Revenge Tales. The stone patio at the Franklin Hills Country Club was strung with white fairy lights, and somewhere behind the string quartet, a photographer adjusted his lens to capture the perfect frame of Richard and Elaine Brooks renewing their vows after 30 years of marriage. It was, by every outward measure, a beautiful afternoon. White peonies and blush garden roses cascaded over ivory linens. The champagne was chilled to exactly the right degree. The guest list read like a directory of Franklin's country club membership, half of Richard's remodeling clients, and most of the congregation from First Baptist. Everyone agreed it was the loveliest event the club had hosted all year. What none of them noticed, because none of them ever did, was that the 25-year-old woman in the pale green dress moving briskly between the catering tent and the gift table had built the website event herself late at night after her actual job. She had designed the invitations. She had spent 3 weeks quietly fixing vendor mix-ups her mother refused to handle directly because that's what Savannah's good at. Nobody had asked her to do any of it. She had simply done it, the way she always did, because somewhere along the way she had learned that love in the Brooks family was something you earned through usefulness, never something that was simply given. Her older sister, Madison, stood near the arch in a champagne-colored gown, accepting compliments on how beautifully she'd organized everything. "Madison, sweetheart, this is just stunning," said a woman from the garden club, squeezing her hand. "Thank you so much," Madison said, glowing. "It's been a labor of love." Savannah, 20 feet away, adjusting a floral arrangement that had tipped in the breeze, said nothing. She had learned years ago not to correct the record. Correcting the record made her difficult. Being difficult made her mother's mouth go thin and quiet in a way that could ruin an entire week. It was while replacing a bent stem near the edge of the patio that she felt it, a sharp sting on her forearm, quick as a static shock, gone before she could even glance down to see what had caused it. She rubbed the spot absently and kept working, the way she trained herself to keep working through almost anything. Within minutes, her lips felt strange, tight, swollen, though she told herself she was imagining it, that she didn't have time today to imagine things. By the time she reached the edge of the dance floor, her throat had begun to close, and every breath she pulled in came back smaller than the one before it, like the air itself was retreating from her. She found her father first. "Dad," she managed, her voice already thinning. "Something's wrong. I can't breathe right." Richard Brooks turned, took one look at his daughter's face, and sighed the particular sigh he reserved only for her. "Savannah, not now," he said, glancing past her at the photographers setting up near the arch. "Whatever this is, it can wait 20 minutes. "Dad, I'm serious. I can't." "You are always serious," he said, lower now, his smile never leaving his face for the benefit of the guests nearby. "Go sit down somewhere if you need to. We are not doing this today, of all days." She turned to her mother next, her hand finding Elaine's arm, gripping it hard enough to leave a mark. "Mom!" Elaine's eyes flicked toward the growing knot of guests raising their phones to capture candid shots of the celebration. "Please," Elaine whispered, not looking at her daughter's face, only at the space just past her shoulder. "Please, don't do this right now. The photographer is about to call us up. Can you just go sit somewhere quiet?" Behind them, Madison had noticed the small commotion and stepped closer, phone still in hand. "People are already filming. Savannah, whatever this is, can it wait?" Savannah opened her mouth to answer, and nothing came out but a thin, terrible whistle of air. Her vision tunneled. The lights strung overhead blurred into long, white smears. She took 2 stumbling steps toward the stone walkway and went down hard, her shoulder catching the edge of a linen-draped table on the way down, sending a centerpiece crashing to the ground in a spray of water and white petals. For 1 full second, nobody moved. Guests froze mid-conversation. A woman near the bar covered her mouth. Someone's champagne glass tipped and spilled unnoticed onto the grass. Then a chair scraped back hard, and a man was moving fast across the patio. Ethan Calloway, an emergency medicine physician who'd come as Madison's friend from college, dropping to his knees beside Savannah before anyone else had taken a single step toward her. "Someone call 911, now," he said, and there was nothing polite left in his voice. "She's in anaphylaxis. Does anyone have an EpiPen? Does she carry one?" "She's always been dramatic," Richard said to the small cluster of guests near him, his tone almost apologetic, as though he were the one being inconvenienced by his daughter's collapse. "I'm sorry about this, everyone. Please, let's just—" "Richard!" Ethan's voice cut through the patio like a blade through silk. "Look at her lips. Look at her airway. This is not dramatic. This is a medical emergency. And if there is an EpiPen anywhere in this building, I need it in the next 60 seconds, or she is going to die in front of all of you." Something in his tone finally broke through. A caterer sprinted for the club's first aid kit. Someone located an injector. Ethan administered it himself, counting seconds under his breath, one hand monitoring her pulse, the other steady and warm on her shoulder. "Stay with me," he said quietly, just to her, his face close to hers. "You're going to be okay. I've got you. I'm not going anywhere." It was the first time in longer than she could remember that someone had said those words to her and clearly meant every syllable of them. The ambulance arrived 9 minutes later. Savannah remembered very little of the ride, only the oxygen mask, the paramedic's steady voice, and the strange, hollow realization, somewhere beneath the fog of adrenaline, that her mother had not climbed in beside her. At the hospital, doctors confirmed what Ethan had already known, a severe allergic reaction, almost certainly from an insect sting, that without rapid treatment could easily have taken her life. She was kept overnight for observation. She lay in the narrow bed with an IV taped to the back of her hand, staring at the ceiling tiles, waiting for her phone to light up with someone asking how she felt. It lit up. "Please don't post anything about this online," her mother wrote. "People are already talking. This could ruin everything we've built with the club." Then, from her father, "I need the final invoice numbers from the Whitfield remodel by tomorrow morning. Also, we need to control the narrative on this. Can you just tell people it was a panic attack?" Then, Madison. "Everyone keeps asking questions. Can you please just say you had a panic attack? It'll blow over faster if we're all saying the same thing." Not one message asked how she felt. Not one asked if she was in pain, if she was frightened, if she needed anything at all. Not one of them asked if she was even still breathing on her own. Savannah set the phone face down on the blanket and stared at the ceiling until her eyes burned and the fluorescent light blurred into a soft, meaningless glow. Lying there in the sterile quiet, she began to understand that this was not one cruel afternoon. It was the shape of her entire life, finally visible all at once, the way a photograph only reveals its blur when you step back far enough to see the whole frame at once. She remembered being 12, doubled over with stomach pain her mother insisted was attention-seeking, until an emergency appendectomy proved otherwise. And even then, no apology followed, only a brief comment that she should have said something sooner. She remembered building her father's entire website during her sophomore year of college, managing his online ads, answering customer emails at midnight, all unpaid, all justified with the same 4 words: family helps family. She remembered designing every piece of Madison's wedding planning brand, the logo, the brochures, the client presentations, while Madison told friends at brunch that she'd hired a designer, never once saying her sister's name. She had spent 25 years being useful. She had never once, not a single time, been protected. The next morning, Richard, Elaine, and Madison arrived carrying a bouquet of grocery store carnations and a folded sheet of paper. Elaine held it out gently, like a peace offering she expected to be accepted without question. "We wrote something for you to post, just something simple, that you had an anxiety attack and that everyone responded wonderfully. It'll put people's minds at ease." Savannah looked at the paper without taking it. "I also need those quarterly numbers finished for the Whitfield account. The client's asking, and I told him you'd have it handled." "And," Madison, wringing her hands, "if you're not going to be able to keep up with the branding work for a while, I need to know now. I have 2 client meetings this month, and I can't afford to fall behind because of," she gestured vaguely at the hospital bed, "all this." "Stop." Savannah's voice was quiet, but it landed in the room like a dropped glass. They stopped. "I want to ask you 3 questions," she said, "and I want an honest answer to each one, even if you don't like how it sounds out loud." Nobody spoke. The machine beside her bed beeped softly into the silence. "Who believed me when I said I couldn't breathe?" Silence. "Who rode in the ambulance with me?" Heavier silence now, Elaine's eyes dropping to the folded paper still in her hand. "Who has asked me one single time since yesterday how I'm feeling? Not what I need to say publicly, not what I owe anyone, how I actually feel." The room said nothing at all, and that nothing was the truest thing anyone in her family had told her in 25 years. "You can go now," Savannah said, reaching for the call button to ask the nurse to end the visit early. In the weeks that followed, Savannah did something she had never once allowed herself to do. She stopped explaining herself. She transferred every password, every client login, every piece of marketing material connected to her father's business back into his own hands, attaching a short professional email stating that all future design work would require a signed contract and payment, exactly like any other client would provide. She sent Madison a similar message. Her family responded with outrage, accusing her of turning cold, of abandoning people who loved her. She saved every message. She answered none of them. Elaine, unable to control the version of events already circulating through the club, posted on the community page that Savannah had suffered an emotional breakdown and that irresponsible rumors were damaging the family's good name. It might have worked if half the reception hadn't already witnessed the truth with their own eyes, and if several guests didn't have it recorded on their phones. Complaints reached the club's board within days. An ethics hearing was scheduled to review both the misleading public statements and the pressure that had been placed on witnesses to stay quiet about what they saw. Savannah did not go looking for a fight. She simply gathered the hospital records, the text messages, and a clear, dated timeline of what had happened, and she told the truth plainly when she was asked to speak. The hearing took place in a small conference room off the main clubhouse, board members seated at a long table, Richard, Elaine, and Madison across from them, looking smaller than Savannah had ever seen them look. Richard insisted everything had been exaggerated, that his daughter had a history of overreacting under stress. Elaine said she had only wanted to protect the family from gossip. Madison said she had simply frozen, that anyone would have in her position, that it wasn't fair to judge her for one panicked moment. Then Ethan Calloway spoke, calm and precise, describing exactly what he'd seen, a young woman collapsing to the ground while her own father told nearby guests she was being dramatic, while her mother worried aloud about photographs, while her sister worried about who was filming. 2 other guests, unprompted and without being asked twice, quietly confirmed every detail. The printed messages were passed around the table without Savannah needing to say another word. They spoke for themselves, in black and white, time-stamped and undeniable. Not one message from her family in the 24 hours after her collapse had asked whether she survived. "I want to be clear about something," Savannah said finally, when the board turned to her. "I'm not here because I want anyone punished. I'm here because I finally stopped agreeing to lie about what happened to me." The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when the truth finally outweighs the performance built around it. The board voted to remove Elaine from her position chairing the charity committee, citing her misuse of the community page. Richard lost a renovation contract worth a considerable sum after losing his temper during the hearing and threatening to pull his company from the club entirely. Madison lost several high-paying wedding clients once word quietly spread of how she'd behaved while her own sister lay on the ground, unable to breathe. None of it was Savannah's doing, not directly. She had not orchestrated a single consequence. She had simply stopped shielding them from the natural result of their own choices, and that, it turned out, was more than enough. In the months that followed, she opened a small design studio of her own, the same kind of work she had given away for years, now finally hers, finally paid, finally respected by people who signed contracts and said, "Thank you." She started therapy, slowly unlearning the belief that her worth was measured by how much she could give away before she ran empty. She built friendships with people who asked how her day had gone and actually stayed quiet long enough to hear the answer. At her studio's grand opening, strung with simple white lights of her own choosing this time, her family arrived unannounced, flowers in hand, insisting they were ready to move forward as a family. But when Savannah asked, gently but plainly, whether they were ready to acknowledge what they had actually done that day on the patio, they only repeated that it was time to let the past go. When they refused to leave after she'd asked once and then again, security walked them politely to the door. She stood in the middle of her new studio afterward, surrounded by work that belonged entirely to her, and felt something unfamiliar settle over her chest, right where the tightness used to live. Peace. Not because her family had suffered, but because for the first time in her life, they no longer held the power to decide what she was worth. If this story moved you, if you've ever been the one who gave everything and received almost nothing back in return, hit subscribe and stay with us here at the Family Revenge Tales, because your story matters every bit as much as the ones we tell. And remember this, the people who truly love you will believe you the moment you say you're struggling, not question your timing, and not ask what it costs them first. This story carries meaningful value beyond its entertainment. It illustrates the long-term psychological cost of family favoritism and emotional neglect, showing how these patterns can masquerade as normal family dynamics for years until a genuine crisis makes them impossible to ignore any longer. It demonstrates the importance of setting firm boundaries and demanding real accountability, even from the people closest to us, and shows that walking away from a harmful dynamic is not selfishness, but a necessary act of self-preservation. It also highlights how meaningful consequences should arise naturally from a person's own choices, rather than from orchestrated revenge, which tends to be a healthier and far more sustainable form of justice in the long run. Finally, it reminds viewers that self-worth should never be measured by how much a person is willing to give to others who consistently refuse to give anything back in return.